All right, ladies and gentlemen. I do appreciate you guys pulling up once again to Sculpting 1. Last class, we discussed some, I want to say lighting techniques and different things like that. And this week, I wanted to touch on composition. And composition is something that is very important when it comes to uh, art in general. When it comes to movies, all that composition is very important. Composition, some people call it staging, depending on what you're on. Some people use those terms a little interchangeably. But for the purposes of this class, I'm gonna call it uh, composition. And the reason composition is important is because it you're essentially directing the viewer's eye. You're directing what they're looking at any given moment. Your job as the creator is to do that, is to tell the audience where to look, where to pay attention to. And you can do that with a number of different visual cues. You can do that with lighting. You can do that with staging. You can do that with size. You can do that with color. So there are a lot of different ways for you that you can use composition to really effectuate how your models, how your videos, how your everything is seen, interpreted, and absorbed by the consumer, the person who's viewing your art. So that's what I wanted to talk about today. And a lot of this conversation, I will be essentially parroting from one of these really, it's like one of my favorite people to learn from. His name is Neil Blevins. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of him, but if you haven't heard of him, I will post a link to the actual data and the things that he talks about. I'm going to go through a lot of it with you guys, and I've added some of my own things that I picked up here and there as well. But I'm going to lean a lot on Neil Blevins. He goes by Soulburn, and he also writes a lot of script for 3ds Max and different programs like that. He's like a visual artist, general artist, wrote a bunch of books on the subject. So he's a really good source for composition, art in general, and I've really liked learning from him. I mean, I've been looking at his stuff since I was in college, so yeah, it's really cool. And I will also be showing you guys some stuff from one of my favorite 3D artists. Unfortunately, he passed away a while ago. His name is Paul Papera, and if you guys haven't heard of him, he's a really awesome artist, very talented guy, gone too soon. And he definitely accentuates, and he really emphasizes what I talk about when I talk about how to composing on different levels, from large scale to small scale, size variation, composition, all those things. He uses it very skillfully, very masterfully, and I wanted to just share that with you guys. And I'm gonna obviously give you guys the PowerPoint, and then have you guys kind of do your own research. And then if I have time, I'm gonna jump inside of ZBrush to start going through our sculpt for your finals. All right. So let us begin with composition. Composition. Very important. And yeah, let's get started. All right, composition by Neil Blevins, art by Paul Papera and Neil Blevins, and presented by moi. All right. So areas of visual detail and areas of visual rest. Whenever you guys are doing 3D modeling, character sculpting, anything like that, it's important to keep in mind areas of visual detail, high detail, and then areas of visual rest. All right. So what that means, let me show you what that means in practical kind of means. If you look at just my screen alone, just look at just the image that you're seeing from me. If you look at the background, right, you can see that there is a lot of information. There's a lot of information behind me, like in the sense of there's a lot of stuff packed onto this, and then you get areas of rest, right? Then there's big shapes, small shapes, intermediary shapes. There's like little dots. So like that's what I mean by there's large areas, right? Large parts like this picture of Yoda, large area. Then it goes down into smaller detail like these chords, the little lightsaber, the toys and things like that, smaller. So your eye kind of moves around, right? If I wanted to compose this better, right, I would have lines that lead directly. Right now, this line leads to my mouth. Well, I would find a way to get like one of these, maybe this picture, to lead you to my eye. So whenever you rest back to whenever your eyes is going around, you're gonna probably start here. Then if your eye wanders to the small detail, it'll fall back on the picture of Vader, and then hopefully that line leads you back to my head, my face area, right? These lightsabers where they're pointing, right? When it comes to compositing and composing and staging, I'm telling you, it's one of those things that it's done very, very on purpose. When it comes to people like Disney, Pixar, everything is placed where it's placed on purpose. There's never anything that is done without reason. All right, so that's what you have to keep in mind is everything is purposeful. Everything means something, right? Because what you're trying to do, like I said, is lead the eye. Let the eye have areas of visual detail, areas of rest. All right. So there are tons of topics when you talk about composition. You can really get into a rabbit hole. There's compositional weight, contrast and composition. There's how light and shadow play into your composition, how you use primary, secondary, and tertiary shapes, and detail to compose your image. How detail works is its way in, and even the issue of tangents. Each of these topics deserves to be studied on their own and practiced to make them secondhand knowledge. Today, we will discuss visual detail and areas of interest in your composition. Though all of these ideas can be learned separately, they all come together to help you, the artist, tell a much more compelling story. And I've told you guys, when you get to a professional level, everybody knows the basics. Everybody understands how to model, right? Everybody knows how to UV unwrap. Everybody knows how to texture. What's going to set you apart is your storytelling abilities, how you visually compel people to imagine things and picture things that you're giving them cues on, right? And if you're not doing a good job of that, well, you're going to get passed over for somebody who can tell a better story than you, right? The name of the game these days is how well you can tell a story with your composition, with your artwork, right? And lighting, shadow, how those kind of things play and kind of marry yin yang with each other. So that's what we're going to talk about. All right. The basic idea is you are trying to create large uninterrupted shapes with small condensed areas of detail. Simple overall shapes with moments of hyper detailing punctuating the cleaner surface. All right. So when we look at this image right here, this is one of Neil Blevin's images. And you can see that there's like broad, right, more open design, more broad shapes. And then you can go to areas of more detail, like these blades, more detail here. But then you've got open design and you've got big shapes, right, large shapes. Then you've got medium shapes. Then you've got small shapes. And then you might even have micro shapes even further. So he's mixing those very well. And the problem a lot of the times that artists run into is that what they'll do is they'll either over detail their characters so you can't even see what's going on. And that's like, I call that the Transformers effect, right? Where like everything is like moving and everything is a rivet that's an inner rivet that's transforming and moving. I'm like, it gets too much. Your eye gets confused. You don't even know what's going on, right? If you look at any of those Transformer movie like transformations, like some of them get so convoluted that you're just like, what is going on, you know? Let me see if I can pull one up. It just gets so, it just, you know, it just gets it gets so busy, right? And it's hard for people to keep what's going on in their mind. All right, so let me see if I can so let's look at this. Let me not get copyrighted. So like, it's hard to see what's going on, you know. Let's see if 480 is the best. Right, like even in between those shots, like what just happened? You know, like you look at that and go, what piece goes into what? Right? Back in the day when Transformers were first made, like the transformations were so simple and understandable, right? But nowadays it's just so hard, like because of visual effects and CG, that it makes like, look at this, like, oh, okay, that makes sense. That like, boom, boom. Look at that. That's a simple transformation. I can understand what's going on, right? You can understand that. But we went from something like this that you can understand to, you know, and this is the Michael Bay effect. I blame this on Michael Bay. Like, what was all this? It's like Bumblebees isn't the worst, but like there's just so much going on with these transformations that you get lost visually, right? Optimus is all right, but it's just at a certain point we're doing too much. I think, yeah, Starscream. Yeah, like it's, you see just this look. If I step into this frame alone, right? Let me see if I can go frame by frame for some of these. You just get lost in the detail. And I don't know if that was a purposeful decision, but you can get so easily lost in what's going on that there's no way that you can make a toy that can replicate that. Like what went into what? Like what just went into what? And then so that's what I'm talking about when I say the transformations get a little too outlandish. All right? So this image is a bit dull. It has contrast in value, but all the squares are the same size. All right? You're going to get visual interest from the fact that they are different colors. They vary in shape a little bit, but it's still relatively a boring image. All right? So this is Transformers Cybertron. This is what I talk about when I talk about hyper detailing. Everything is agreeable. If you guys don't know what agreeable is, it's like these little, it's like a bunch of little square shapes and things like that. Agreeable meshes. You can download scripts for them, and it's just like all these little blocks, and that looks like paneling and work and in different, you know, mechanical things that's happening that your eye just never really gets a chance to relax, right? Like there's information right there. There's information right there. It's just over detailed, right? And once you get to a certain level, it's cool that you can do that, but it's not very visually interesting because everything kind of goes blah. Everything kind of blends into each other, and it doesn't really do anything visually. It's not really, I mean, what is it? Is it a spaceship? Is it a butthole? Is it is it a satellite? Like what am I looking at? Like I don't know. So you don't want to get into this trap of over detailing everything that you do, right? The image above gets too noisy, and I end up going back to the logo. The contrast is minimal, and there is just too much visual information to tell a cohesive story. I don't want you to mistake that as saying the artist is bad. The art is good, but the composition of the elements is bad. I know they spent a lot of time polishing this piece, but visually it can lose your audience in the detail for detail's sake, right? And that's what I'm talking about with these greeble mesh, is because people get so enamored with, ooh, I can just put details on everything. I can put paneling here, panel here. What does the paneling do? Does it make any sense to the story? Does it tell a story? Does it help me understand what's going on in the story? Or are you just putting detail for detail's sake? And that's the problem, is like, this is a character, but Jesus Christ, like what is this guy made of? Trash? Like, is this, like it's such an interesting phenomenon that happened over time when it came to art, is that we got to this level where we could put so much detail into stuff that people were just like, let's get some more detail in there. Let's just over detail everything, right? And you don't get anything visually compelling anymore. You get these piles of heaps of garbage tech that just blend into each other and don't mean anything, all right? So what happens when you start varying not only the color, but the shape, is you get something a little more visually interesting, right? It's better, but it's still not as interesting as it could be, since the size variation is a little too random and evenly painted across the surface, right? You can get lost in this, right? There's a little bit of there's a spot here, white, that's super bright. There's darks, there's, but you're still super detailed, right? A far more interesting approach is areas of lots of details and areas with less detail. Contrast in value and size. The eye is drawn in and stays for a little while instead of leaving quickly because everything is too detailed, right? Like I said, when we're looking at my background, it's easy. You can flow through, the shot. Right? Right now, my eye kind of goes here, and out, right? And then I can rest. Like, this is areas of visual rest. And then it goes back into the detail, right? Areas of rest and areas of detail. These help you tell stories, because now I can imagine maybe, this is the interior of the ship, right? Like, this is where they're housing different things in here, or this is larger grass areas over here, and this is like a city or something, right? So you're giving me something more to work with visually, right? You let my eyes rest. You let my vision rest from the amount of detail that you're putting in there. Right? And this is what I want you guys to start thinking about, looking at whenever, even with your characters, right? You want areas of visual rest and then areas of spots of detail, right? Because it gives the audience, okay, I'm looking, oh, okay, that's interesting. I can focus on this, and then they can move on, right? So this is a really good example of that, where you've got areas of rest, and then you've got this really interesting, intricate piping work, right, that goes on inside of here, right? This is really cool because he's got variation in the color, right? You've got a little bit of rust, you've got some paneling, you've got some paint, you've got chipped paint, you've got edge wear, right? You've got this dielectric paint, you've got electric conduct, there's metal underneath, there's rust. This visually is telling me a story, right? This is visually telling me all right, this isn't a new product off the factory line. This is an engine, a turbine, something that has been used and has seen life, right? What happens is somebody tried to open this panel, so they probably spilled something on it, it rusted. They've been hacking away at this area right here. That's why there's a lot of a lot of these places. I imagine humans had something to do with these parts. Maybe they come to fix this part and they have to pick it up all the time. So over time, sweat, all these things touch this area and then it rusts over time, right? Areas that humans have to deal with get a little more rusted, get a little more worn, right? Think about, your keys. If you use it all the time, there's going to be a part of it, right, that rubs off because you're touching that part every time you use it, every single day, right? These are the types of things that you guys need to start looking at and thinking about whenever you're creating your pieces, whenever you're creating your characters. These things help, all right? So when we talk about other things, like there's stuff like visual hooks versus visual pillars, right? A visual hook for a character is usually, I think about that with like characters and things like that. Like if you think about Cloud from Final Fantasy, if you guys don't know that game, Cloud, my first thought is he has a giant sword. That's his visual hook. That's his thing, right? When you think about like Altair from Assassin's Creed, his visual hook is he's wearing a hood, right? Like that's his hook, that's his thing. Is although I'm pretty sure the reason they gave him a hood was because they didn't want to have to model and design hair for the game. It's usually there's a lot of times what you realize is artists do stuff very sneakily, right? Like it's a sneaky like way to get away with having to do hair physics and hair dynamics and shit like that. It's just put a hood on. Hey, we ain't got to do that. Nobody has to worry about, how the hair flows. No, just put on a hood and he's good to go. All right. But when you talk about design pillars, I'm thinking more larger groups of species. Like think about like, okay, when you think about like Tatooine, what's the visual pillars? It's a desert. Right, it's the sandy place, so all the aesthetics are going to be desert-like, vast expanses of space of desert. Right, that's what I think about. Right, when I think about Tatooine. Let me think about when I think about the Amazon jungle. What do I think about? What's the visual pillars of the Amazon? Green, lush trees, rivers, marshes, and different species of animals, right? When I think of Antarctica, the Arctic, what do I think of? Open space of snow, glaciers, ice, right? So if I design something for the Arctic, I'm not gonna put in things that belong in the Amazon, right? Because that is not a visual pillar of the Arctic, right? If I'm designing something, right? Okay. Let me put a caveat on that. The only reason you would do that is if it has something to do with the story. It pertains to this, like, it's like, okay, maybe Superman's Fortress of Solitude somehow got miniaturized and then put inside of the Amazon. Right now, it's part of the story. It tells the story, so that makes sense to the story. But I'm not just gonna willy-nilly just be like, all right, let me put some glaciers inside of the Amazon. Well, it wouldn't make any sense. The biome wouldn't support that, right? So it has to make sense with what you're working on, and that's my only caveat, because sometimes you can break those rules, but you have to have a reason to break it, and you have to understand the rules before you break those rules. When I think about like a high-tech scrap society, right? Everything's going to be made out of this scrap metal and things like that. Nothing's going to be new. So if I put a new piece of software, a new piece of thing there, it's going to look visually out of space. Like it's going to look visually out of place. It's going to not look like it belongs there. You're going to be like, oh, this doesn't match the theme, the thematics of this area, right? If you think about an epic scale world, right? Places with, vast castles or vast dungeons and things like that. Well, you're not going to start putting little things everywhere because it doesn't match this aesthetic of it, right? You're going to want to put things that make sense to the area, right? That's what I talk about that's what I mean when I talk about visual pillars. Visual pillars tell your story. lets the audience know, like, when you get there, oh, I'm in the desert, it's gonna be hot, I'm gonna need some water here. If I get in the jungle, ooh, it's gonna be, there's giant anacondas that I could encounter, right? Because we all do share these kind of lived experiences with each other. We all understand and know what a desert's supposed to look like, what a desert's supposed to feel like. We know what the tundra's supposed to feel like. We know what the Arctic is supposed to feel like. We know what these biomes are supposed to feel like, right? So if we see something that doesn't belong or feel out of place, right, we're going to notice that. We're going to go, well, this doesn't, and it's going to take you out of the immersion of that world. And what you want to do is you want to immerse people into your world, all right? And the composition of this is also very important. So now let's talk about Paul Pepera. And this guy is, like, man, one of my favorite artists of all time. And, you know, I really did, like, take a lot of, like, I'd spend, like, just hours just looking at how he does his rivets, how he does, you know, like, like all of the little things, like his bevels, the edges, like this is just so technically good. Like, it's just technically sound modeling. And if you see his like wireframe, you're just gonna be like, Jesus Christ, this guy was amazing. Like, this guy's work was just standalone friggin' awesome, right? And he did a really good job. Like, you'll be hard pressed to find shit that doesn't look right when it comes to Paul Pepera's stuff, right? He just had such a good eye for detail, right? And you can see what I'm talking about when I talk about areas of visual rest, right? You can rest here, you can rest over where these bigger panels are, and then you've got more informations of detail right up here, right? You've got areas of detail, and it goes from large to small to medium with the piping, right? And then super small, and then he uses color itself to drive that message home. He uses color, you know, a muted green, muted, you know, lime green kind of color here, and then he uses this red kind of color to draw more attention, and then you've got yellow wires that go up and down that kind of draw, oh, okay, there's something, this is a hydraulic system, it powers something, it makes sense, right? If you designed the transformers using this technique, it would be so awesome, right? That's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. All right, so this is the kind of modeling that just, I mean, I love this kind of 3D modeling right here. This is the creme de la creme, right? This is the crescendo. This is when you know you've done it, right? Even the transitions from these kind of giant broad pieces to these softer pieces over here, and then you've got little where the nuts and the bolts go in, right? It makes sense. It all makes sense. You feel like if you saw this, I know how it work, right? This giant arm opens this door, right? And I probably see something that told me what's going on at the top of this screen here, right? So it makes sense. It feels real. It can be grounded in something that I could believe that I could run into and see, like, and I could run up to this panel and put in a code. It's probably gonna be wrong, but I'm gonna try to get in, right? Like, it's gonna give me a error message, right? These kind of things are super, super cool. They're awesome. And you know, he just does such a good job of, like, even like some of his soft surfaces, like the way he mixes soft surfaces, balancing that with hard surface modeling. Just fantastic work. Fantastic work. All right, so this is another one where you can see like areas of rest, and then you've got like a lot of detail, hardcore detail, wiring, right? You can do that, but you need to give us areas of rest as well. You need to give us, like, all right, I can chill here for a second, but ooh, let me take in a little bit of this. What's going on over here? I can rest over here. Ooh, these are probably giant lights, right? There's a battery system that helps them, but then you've got areas of general rest that happens. You've got this little, you know, boom pole thing that does something right here, right? Then you've got this ship that's probably coming to fix this light. That's what I'm imagining is happening. Like, okay, this ship is here. I'm guessing to fix this lighting system, right? This is probably a mechanic or hardware ship that comes up, does its thing, pulls out the boom pole, opens the hatch, cuts the wire. You can do all of it remote from inside this little system right here. But then we're in the vastness of space. So I'm like, man, what could happen? What could pop up out of nowhere, right? You've told me a story. This is telling me a story. This is giving me so much to work with that I'm not focused on, like, I'm not kind of lost as to like what's going on. I can kind of create my own story from the visual cues that I'm giving, right? Like there's a hot bright light back here, right? That helps to say, hey, okay, whenever this arm moves, this light probably can shine onto something and light the path. He's got little lights here, probably the propellers back here, the thrusters, right? Little things like that. And then the fact that the arm isn't some hard surface thing. It's covered in soft cloth to protect it from what? Right? What kind of weather are they experiencing out in the vast expanse of space? What kind of debris, what kind of things is going on out here that they use soft material like this to cover the ship, right? Very interesting. It gives you a lot of visual interest, right? Reflectors, obviously some sort of light, right? These are the kind of things that help us to generate these ideas, these things that happen in our mind, lets our imagination kind of run wild a little bit. But if you do the Transformers method where everything is visually crazy, it's hard for people to kind of be like, all right, what's going on? Let me just go back to the logo and then I'm going to move on from the image. All right. So I've also added the resources to these guys. So if you guys want to check these out, oops, I don't know if maybe that one's not working. But if you guys want to check out some of these visual pillars, right? He even talks about, how if you're in this world, right, everything's going to be rusted. That's what I was talking about. I was like, everything's going to match, right? If you're talking about epic scale, everything should have an epic scale to it. And that's what I'm talking about right there, right? And he even uses mech analysis to do that, right? So this is Cloud, right? If you know who Cloud is, right? He's got a huge sword. That's his visual hook, right? When you talk about the land, right, you can see that this is what I'm talking about when it comes to the snow, the Arctic versus the desert, Tatooine versus Dagobah versus, Hoth system, right? You just get different visual cues from those places, right? When you think about Transformers, right, but back in the day, they were very simple. You could understand how they move, how they conform into each other, how the shapes work, right? Then GoBots versus GoBots versus, this is the Bay, he calls them the Bayformers. The Transformers, they're just way too complex, right? From our old boxy. If you think about Neon Genesis Evangelion, right? These guys, they're very skinny, anemic kind of robots, right? You can tell their visual hooks. They're very different. When you talk about 5-star stories, these are more bulky. They almost look like knights, right? And that's their visual cues, right? This is Krieger's stuff. You can tell they have their own visual look, their own visual style, right? So you just looking at even these different robots, you can tell what property, what IP they belong to because the visual cues are there. Pacific Rim, very Americana, very like big robot kind of design to them, right? Bright colors, standard, the paint, even the paint schemes themselves are very, very American industrial, right? These are real steel robots, right? Almost samurai like. This one's like Romanesque, right? Battletech, you can tell the difference, right? This is a bipedal kind of robot, right? Very boxy in shape, right? The weapons, they have arm cannons and different things like that, lasers, these kind of ATST kind of legs, right? So you guys have all of this information. I want you guys to check these guys out, and yeah, Warhammer has their own visual style too, right? So like these are super super cool ways for you guys to kind of start getting a visual idea of, oh, okay, if I'm looking at this, I know that it's this. Big O, I remember this was a pretty dope show. Horizon Zero Dawn, you can tell by they have their own style, right? Their own visual hooks to them. So keep that in mind whenever you're sculpting, whenever you're modeling, whenever, what's your visual hook? What's your visual style, right? How is my composition affecting all of that? Lighting, shadow, large shapes, small shapes, medium shapes, all right? All of these play a role into making your characters much more appealing, much more compelling, and they help tell a better story for you guys, all right? So, after this, we are going to jump into ZBrush, all right?